A very good morning and thanks for joining us in another edition of Political Spectrum, live on Spectrum Television. I'm Raymond in Nigeria after over a month away for a holiday, which also culminated in the recent Eid al-Fitr celebration and also other events, of course, around the planned travel, where we know about 17 governors will be leaving office come May 29. But let's start off program with over around the president-elect's return to the country and the fact that it seems to have stoked up tensions that apparently died down after he traveled away from the country, which appeared to have been, kept in the tide until Mr. Tinubu returns to the country. Well, let's start off with that. The former Lagos State Governor arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. Well, the APC stalwart, who was officially out of the country, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, and they were of course received by the Vice President-elect Kashim Shettima, Plateau State Governor Simon Lalong, the Speaker of the House. Now, a valedictory meeting of the 36 state governors of the Federation will be held on Wednesday, April, by the Director General of the Nigeria Governors Forum, Aishana Okaru. Now, according to the invitation letter, the valedictory meeting stated that all the governors would have the opportunity to give valedictory remarks after the chairman's opening speech. Now, it is on record that 17 governors are actually leaving the May 14 and 17, 2023. And this also means that this meeting will bring an end to the chairmanship of Governor Aminu Tambuwal of Sokayade Fayemi. Well, first-time governors are ineligible to contest for the chairmanship of the Nigeria Governors Forum. So expect one of the crop of the old guard to succeed. Yesterday expressed serious concern over the current state of the nation. Well, the comment comes on the back of an appeal by President Buhari to Nigerians, of the Afenifere, Jare Ajayi. The group wondered why the government of President Muhammadu Buhari is thinking of taking such a step when it's about 1 month for it. Gave a lot of concern, especially as the country moved towards the handing over of power on May 29 this year. Well, Ajayi said it would have been much better if the president had listened to various had taken. Meanwhile, more Nigerians have continued to react to President Buhari's plea for forgiveness as he prepares to vacate office and hand over to President-elect Bola Tinubu. Given by Nigerians is if he corrected the wrongs done by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and that's with respect to the just concluded elections. It all has, of course, to do with the much talked about 2023 elections were conducted. So, with Nigerians, pardon Mr. President, or is this just lip service or showboating by Mr. President in his last days in office or time? Coming 10th National Assembly hits up. Now, while aspirants contesting for the seat of the Senate President awaits the President-elect, now more alliances and caucus are being formed within lawmakers to support aspirants of their choice, especially on the side of the new members-elect. Now, while some of the aspirants have rooted for regional considerations, others have pushed for an open contest, and silence of the APC appears to have caused more tension due to the silence on the issue of zoning. As PDP, with over 3,000 of their followers into the APC at the Rear Admiral Ndubisi Kanu Square in Owerri. Now, the lawmakers from the PDP include Honorable Bede Eke, Honorable Ike, and promise to contribute their quota to the ongoing development in the state. But the lawmakers also promised to collapse all their political structures for governors would be protected. Interesting times indeed ahead of the Imo State governorship elections due to take place later this year. From Imo, we go to neighboring Enugu, where Governor-elect Dr. Peter Mba Transition Committee. Well, the Transition Committee, constituted by Mba, includes internationally recognized technocrats, good governance, transparency, and accountability advocates, some financial and management experts, administration's implementable and impactful development plan, as they termed it, when it assumes office in May. Now, this was disclosed in a statement issued yesterday by the head of the Peter Mba Media Office, Dan Nwome. The governor-elect said the committee will be chaired by Nigeria. There's also Chief Executive Officer of AAA Infrastructure and the Chairman of the Royal Exchange General Insurance from Governor Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi to Governor Peter Mbah of Enugu State. These are things we're expecting to see, of course, when we have the inaugural power to new successors, just as is the expectation at the national level that come May 29, President Buhari has often reiterated would hand over power to President-elect Bola Tinubu, a process they have said there will be notions making the rounds that he possibly met with the Chief Justice of the country outside the shores of Nigeria, claims that have been done of President-elect Bola Tinubu, who had said he is ready for the task ahead. Well, how ready? We'll find out when we come back from this break. Stay with us, Political Spectrum. We'll continue.
Every day, we'll bring you up-to-date education, health,
lifestyle, and so much more. Join Janice Kobum and Uyai Anyeken
every weekday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Rise and Shine Daily, exclusive on Spectrum Television.
And services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television on StarTime, broadening your horizon.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the Africa at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on channel 421 on Star Times to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories on Spectrum Television.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abuse. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some
proceeding.
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding you, lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord. I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and legally speaking.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining us, you're watching Political Spectrum live on Spectrum Television. I am Raymond Eta. Well, the biggest story of the day arguably has to be the return of a president down in the nation's capital, Abuja, after a month away from the country. First, according to official statement from his aides, where he embarked on the Hajj from the hectic electioneering process that started off with the APC presidential campaign primaries back in May last year and culminated in his victory, according to INEC. And some of his aides who came in there to receive them in a good number. Most of them included the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, Plateau State Governor Tinubu, as he, of course, was welcomed back to the country after a month away. Tinubu's return clearly would have stoked the tensions again that apparently are doused after his, as we know it, he had submitted 14 names to be included in the Presidential Transition Committee that is headed by the Secretary to the Governor State. And there's also Governor Lalong of Plateau, one of whom was among the entourage that went to receive President-elect Tinubu, to Tinubu, come May 29. Well, shortly after his arrival and talking to the press, he said he was pretty ready for the tax ahead. And that's what will be majorly looking 29 this year. We know, of course, that there are accompanying issues to a post-Buhari presidency as far as handing over to Tinubu is concerned. The aftermath elections that produced Mr. Tinubu did not meet constitutional or electoral requirements, and it's the premise of which political parties have lodged complaints at the presidential elections petitions trial would be enough to, wrestle the mandates that has been given to him in the views of many by INEC, and doesn't represent the true reflection of the wishes of Nigerians. There's a matters to be the elections. One will agree that the tax before President-elect Bola Tinubu is enormous in the sense that he accepted speech when he, of course, accepted his declaration as the president-elect of the country. And it equally tells cities that followed the aftermath of the elections would meet constitutional requirements and be done within to be allowed to go on to become president, even if it's President-elect Bola Tinubu himself. So it's going to have to take a course forward for the nation positively. But when you have the fact that two of the leading opposition for Mr. Tinubu, when he does come into office, this is just one of the other concerns that most persons have had with regards to how easy definitely be president, even before a first judgment at the Court of Appeal level, the Presidential Elections Petitions Tribunal would be delivered and with leadership of the country. We saw it with a blatant case of the narrow redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria, where it took a third time of asking before President Buhari decided to comply with a Supreme Court's rulings. The apex court in the country could have its verdict, respected or not respected by the presidency. So most persons have argued that it is proven that he did not win the 2023 presidential elections according to constitution. Perhaps orders for a rerun of the elections. Questions that have been raised is that would he, as a sitting president, want to conduct a rerun elections where he also has a lot of these issues will clearly come up, but let's maybe draw our sights on the humongous state of things that he will be inheriting from the current administration, ranging from national unity, which clearly the country has, the health sector, education, as well as how the rest of the international community has viewed Nigeria, not just in the last decade, but more importantly, 829. We'll talk about this when we come back from this break. To stay with us.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by Muslim, our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution.
We do not. I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My Lord, if we cannot find those who...
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My Lord, the matters council is leading the evidence in our...
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my Lord, but we can't be talking about
adversary proceeding.
With legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally speaking. And join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. It's Political Spectrum and Spectrum Television. A reminder of our major focus this morning. President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu has returned to Nigeria after a month away in France and has reiterated that he is ready for the task ahead. The president-elect was greeted by a crowd of supporters, including the premises of the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Abuja, to welcome the president-elect, who has been away from the country for around a month. Well, before we go into those indices, with respect to the grey areas President-elect Tinubu held around his brief disappearance from the country in the past 1 month, well, the first official statement from the Tinubu camp when he first left the country said he was sticking with his declaration and intention to run for president sometime in late March last year. It was followed up by the APC presidential primaries, which he clinched the party's tickets sometime in May, and onwards began and supporters and also trying to reach out to possible opponents. And in the course of that, he has actually, made ties along the line, top of which has to be recouping the support of Seyi Makinde of Oyo, who both galvanized support for him in the course of that presidential election, and several other eye-catching decisions that he's had to make en route to becoming president-elect and now vice president-elect. Well, these are gimmicks and antics that have been employed in the lead-up to the polls. But now that the elections have come and gone, everyone agrees it's time for governance. But Mr. Bola Tinubu, who says he's ready to, do right by Nigerians as president. Well, the first task, some have said, is maybe clearing the air on what he drove for arrest, as he had said, or continue with the mandatory Ramadan fasting, which culminated with the Eid al-Fitr celebration, and maybe decide to do it there in France. He actually jetted out of the country because the state of his health was in a critical condition and he would require treatment. Well, it's a claim that has Tinubu appeared to be quite robust, looking pretty energetic as well, and looks like someone who is actually quite ready, for the touchdown by some of his political opponents. Although you would have to argue as well that Mr. Tinubu himself did not spare some of his, if not all of his major political term. He didn't look like he still had it in him to manage the affairs of the country for a possible 4 or 8 years if he does get another term in another 4 years' time. Well, he has dismissed a lot of this. It was pretty healthy and energetic for the task ahead. And I wonder if it's somewhat triumphant looking return to the country yesterday. Well, from this footage, you can easily tell Mr. Tinubu is well and ready to take over come May 29. There were also allegations, by the way, of a purported meeting with the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Kayode Ariwoola, in the UK. The judiciary have said no such meeting took place between the duo. This, of course, came into fore when Justice Ariwoola was seen leaving the country on a wheelchair. For Mr. Ariwoola went to the UK. So trying to connect these two has been the dilemma of those who have been pushing around well, it's back into the country and away from all of those talks. Let's focus on real-time issues back at home that Mr. Tinubu has to deal with. Well, he has said he's ready for the tasks ahead. But what are these tasks ahead when you agree were exaggerated under this current administration? And what makes the tax even more daunting is the fact that Mr. Tinubu was equally in the PDP at the February 2015 presidential polls. And today, he has campaigned on that premise of being his time. Now he's done it, how does he go about dealing with problems created by a party he equally helped to merge? And we could sum that up to our administration. on some of its policies, chief of which was clearly the Naira redesign policy. Well, we all know the drama that Naira banknote moves that Mr. Tinubu himself claimed were targeted at his person, and in a false hope of trying to derail the funding of his presidential campaign. Well, this was a policy was apparently seen criticizing the policies of this government, and one of the things he said was he was going to dismantle the policy the moment he comes into office. Claims that will also challenge the federal government's CBN policy in court by securing a Supreme Court injunction to order the federal government and the CBN to stay hands on the continuation of that policy. Neutrals even could argue that it did not in any way impact the outcome of this post, except that it only occasioned hardship on most Nigerian. Naira redesign policy had on the people to push through with negative vices such as vote trading and vote buying, which is some ways you could say did not in any way alter the plans or the preparations that they had for this post. So on what premise did Bola Tinubu claim that the Naira redesign subsidy regime? Tinubu as well as President Buhari were one of the chief leaders of a nationwide protest that sparked subsidy. Well, we know Tinubu and Buhari were amongst one of those who led a protest nationwide for a couple of weeks until Jonathan hardship on Nigerians. But that's the fix that the Buhari administration has at the moment, because a few days ago, a statement released not make that decision if they were not certain that it would bring some level of hardship on Nigerians. Well, you cannot butter the true state of this scenario. It is very, very clear. Cost of premium motor spirit, which is pretty likely. And the fact that Nigeria's output in terms of crude oil production is still yet to meet up with OPEC's standard measurement or standard quota is still a big problem for us. And while this time get to decide how the product or just how much the product would go for, depending on the international standard when it comes to premium motor spirit. But over the years, the government has always subsidized the product. The argument is still out there as to whether or not in a country where product, well, if you're not benefiting from good healthcare services, from maybe quality roads, access to water, power and electricity, agriculture, food produce, and several other, then the safest thing they can do to allow a seamless movement of people and businesses across the country is perhaps subsidizing the people. Perhaps it's something the government has reviewed critically before the finance ministry said it is a decision that will be taken after the government is certain that it would not bring any hardship. Subsidy will go if it comes into office. But it begs the question, if the Buhari administration is dragging its feet on when to take the decision to hit the indices first and be certain that taking out subsidy now will not have or impact on the economy negatively, not feel it adversely, and it would not lead to a possible state of chaos, because we've been able to manage through the last 3 to 5 months. Go and say triple that number would definitely lead to, you know, massive inflation, the cost of prices going up, skyrocketing, the economy struggling as well, and also at a time where there's a scarcity of cash of the Naira redesign policy. And it surely has the powers to do so, because just as Mr. President must have approved CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele's Naira redesign policy, you would expect Tinubu to also toe the line. What if Bola Tinubu decides that the Naira redesign policy was a waste of time, and then say we cannot proceed or continue with this, let's return to status quo, and that's concurrent use of the old and new note as provided for by the law? Or in the event that President-elect Tinubu decides that let's do as the court has said, allow the new notes to run side by side until December this year, the way President Buhari or the CBN would have wanted it, because they simply put a deadline that was all too sudden for Nigerians. But the Supreme Court has more or less validated the new ones allowed to run. So President-elect Tinubu, when he becomes president, will clearly be going against a Supreme Court ruling if he decides to scrap the policy altogether. And on the other hand, should he decide to stick to it, do not comply with the new deadline, it will mean a policy clash here. So how ready is Mr. Tinubu to tackle all of these issues? Because it goes beyond saying that you would not say you're going to come in and, have a lukewarm administration. We'll definitely expect you to hit the ground running. But will he do it in the burning issue of insecurity in Nigeria, which has come with the twin arm of insurgency and terrorism, banditry and kidnapping across Nigeria? Although you could say that the Nigerian army and the security apparatus in the country have done their bit in stemming the tide of insecurity order across Nigeria, the Buhari administration had promised to deal with the Boko Haram insurgency in the space of free to security across Nigeria, because if we are at a time where everyone agrees we've reached a melting point and could easily break if the fabrics are not well knitted or held. So, even with all of his experience as a former military head of state, is that something the Tinubu administration could seamlessly handle if and when they do come into office? So this simply means that the Tinubu government must urgently take over, resettle displaced persons and address the causes that have given rise to insecurity, and also properly manage issues around IDPs. Thousands of persons dealt the expected census next month. So by then, Tinubu would have known that these are the number of persons he is accountable for when he does. There's also the small matter of dealing with the ugly menace that is corruption. Another thing, there were wide expectations may still stays this porous, because it is alleged that a good number of the political elites have actually siphoned public funds meant for the developmental programs that would benefit the people. And does it mean that this present administration has been closing serious and really perilous corruption cases that have come up in recent days, some of which have been exposed by even the National Assembly themselves?
Issues affecting the common Nigerian.
Some issues on politics,
Hello, Nigeria. I remain committed.
security,
Every weekday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Rise and Shine Daily, exclusive on Spectrum Television.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by gross level. Our governors have to registered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police.
No, my Lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope and beneficiaries of the death of our brother.
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters council is leading is in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My Lord, sorry, my Lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
The people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733.
Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us. You're watching Political Spectrum live on Spectrum Television. And don't forget, you can always connect with us on StarTime's DTH Channel 421. For like feeds, do well to subscribe to President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu has returned to Nigeria after a month away in France, where he enjoyed a holiday from the hectic Ramadan and the Eid al-Fitr celebration. Well, is back into the country and dismissed claims that have been described in his quarters as false of the major big tax, of course. He's taken over power from President Buhari come May 29, 2023. Our preparations already in top gear for a seamless transition of power between the Presidential Transition Committee, headed by Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, in preparation for the transition. Well, now he's back. You would expect the body language around the political scene in the country, Daura in Katsina State, to begin his enjoying his retirement after a life he said has been well fulfilled, where he has been allowed to serve Nigeria in several capacities. The president, it has led to diverse reactions, including from the Afenifere, the socio-political group in the Southwest, who have said that it would have been better, that should have been taken in the light of development in this country under his administration, but he shied away from doing so, meaning he knew what to have done to really not needed. But there's also, a suffix to all of this. They have said if Mr. President wants to correct the wrongs of his administration, he only has one thing to do, and that's correct an appeal to the presidency to somewhat influence the outcome of the elections. And that's something Mr. President has severally said he will not comply with. The Court of Appeal sitting at the Presidential Elections Petitions Tribunal in Abuja, and of course the apex court in the country, the Supreme Court, that. So all of this have been followed with a series of interesting developments across the country, including claims by the DSS that rather than allow the transition of power to President-elect Bola Tinubu, a statement that has been viewed with suspicions in different quarters, especially since the DSS did not give names or faces of the purported persons it said it had come May 29. And the body language across the country equally suggests so. Even with the other arms of government, there's a continuous lobbying, to even Tinubu's travel out to the country. But he has kept interestingly mum on this issue. The APC has been sung for the role of the Senate presidents. We know a lot of gladiators have come out to declare interest, most of whom were keen supporters of Bola Ahmed Tinubu in his bid to become president. Just another who has thrown his heart into the ring. There's also been gladiators of northern extraction who have also indicated interest to run for that converted office. But it would require, of course, a set of the inauguration in June, or later next month rather, ahead of the inauguration in June. So who would likely be a preferred choice for Mr. Just a mere rhetoric? We do know somehow the executive does have an influence in who emerges as the heads of the legislative arms of government. So not just for the Senate, by the way, the House of Representatives is also generating formation of, a conglomeration of the different members-elect of the National Assembly who have said they will stick with whatever the leadership of the APC, mix in terms of pronouncement on who they want to become, taking a stand that as far as the position of the Speaker and the Senate, as well as the Deputy Speaker or the Deputy Senate President of both chambers of the National Assembly is concerned, they will allow the leadership of the APC, being the ruling party in Parliament, having claimed the highest number. That is a matter for the opposition parties in the country to deal with, and have said they will not want any external influences from other parties in that regard. And arguably the leader, about the numbers, it's the PDP, who would definitely hold sway in that regard. But how much of an influence will Tinubu himself, have in all of this? Since we're talking about the tax ahead of him and his incoming administration, having a legislative arm of government, a rubber-stamped one, could be the bane of progress to what we hoped would be benefiting from the dividends of democracy that the Tinubu administration is glaringly promising. So if we have a National Assembly that simply does the bidding, criticisms will likely laden the entirety of the Tinubu administration when it does come into office. So it's pretty critical that the APC does come up with a name lobbying that will go down. It will still go down to a vote on the floor of the Parliament to decide who the principal officers of the House are. And this is equally important to helping with governance as we move forward. So the challenges ahead for Mr. Bola Tinubu, Citizen Kofi, join us as to whether or not we should favor competence over national unity. Take that over having capable hands, constitute his cabinet to manage the affairs of the country. Well, some would say that Bola Tinubu is quite right of handling affairs for millions of people across the country with taxpayers' money at that, and then you hand it over to someone who knows little or nothing as to how to manage an office of such repute. It would only leave states that Nigerians are in at the moment, all as a fallout of the just concluded elections, which were also stoked up by Mr. Tinubu's insistence on campaigning on a Muslim ticket. Well, he does know that this will be playing on the minds of people as they watch out for who will likely constitute the first. While he says he does favor competence of a national unity, he has to pick the best and the most competent of hands from across the country in line with constitutional provisions. So perhaps micro in the selection of who would constitute appointment, for instance, would go more to a choke or region of the country, while another region is totally excluded. It would certainly lead the place up, and we're not expecting such in further. And we're still talking about the tax ahead of him. He has to unite all the warring factions across the country, especially those concerns that were largely a for his acceptance speech when he was declared president-elect, by reaching out to his defender, as called on Peter Obi, the Labour Party candidate, to withdraw his case against Tinubu's emergence as president-elect from court. Well, you could also argue, so Mr. Tinubu would have to respect the rule of law by not in any way trying to influence the outcome of this election, as is the position posed by the likes of the post-May 29. It's pretty huge, but Nigerians will be watching, and so will the international community, especially with his name being pushed around some negative rhetoric with a report about the nationality of the president-elect. Again, claims that have been dismissed, but some Nigerians have said no smoke without fire, and it's a matter that should be thoroughly invested with them as well. But that's how far we can go on today's edition of the program. A reminder of the major story: President-elect Bola Tinubu is back in the country with barely over a month to go before he's going forward in the next 4 or possible 8 years. Will he take the boxes right? Well, time will tell. But that's how far we can go on Political Spectrum for today.